Hey, welcome back to the Motivational Intelligence Podcast, where we talk to some of the world's most accomplished people about how they motivate themselves and how they motivate others. I'm Sean Johnson, and this is a three-part series on the virus that has the world standing still right now, COVID-19. So in this three-part series, we're talking to the top brass at 2Logical about the lessons they've learned over the years and the leaders they've observed in turbulent times, from Black Monday to 9/11 to the financial crisis of 2008 and a whole bunch more. This episode is my conversation with Gianni about the 4 things that great leaders are doing differently during the COVID-19 crisis. But before we dive in, I have a public service announcement. So as a result of all the challenges popping up from COVID-19, 2Logical is doing something unique. With podcasts now more popular than ever, and a lot of workforces are now suddenly remote, we think it might be a good idea for companies to have their own internal podcast. Might be one of the best things you can do for yourself and your people and your organization right now to keep everybody on the same page. So what we're doing is we're offering to produce a free internal podcast for up to 5 organizations. So this will be a private podcast available exclusively to your employees. It'll be co-branded with your company, produced by our top trainers, and it'll be completely customized to your organization. So it might include things like interviews with top performers, strategy talks with executives, stories from the front lines, tips, best practices, those kinds of things, and a whole bunch more. So in case you need some help selling this internally, 2Logical was actually just named one of the top 20 leadership training companies in the world by Training Industry. We can only do this for 5 organizations, and once the slots are filled, they're filled. So if you're interested, get your name in early, fill out an application at 2logical.com. Until next time, please enjoy.
The Motivational Intelligence Podcast is produced by the award-winning team at 2Logical, the world's leading expert in motivational intelligence and one of 2020's top 20 leadership training companies in the world, as recognized by Training Industry. As a result of the challenges popping up from COVID-19, 2Logical is doing something unique for a limited time. With podcasts more popular than ever and a suddenly remote workforce, having your own internal podcast might be one of the best things you can do for your people and your organization right now. We're offering to produce a free internal podcast for you, no strings attached. This will be a private podcast available exclusively to your employees, co-branded with your company, produced by our top trainers, and completely customized to your organization. We can only do this for 5 organizations, and once the slots are filled, they're filled. So if you're interested, get your name in early and fill out an application at 2logical.com.
All right, so we're back with the big man. Joe, how's quarantine life?
Quarantine life is terrific, let me tell you. I'm really getting in touch with myself.
A lot of time to think, huh?
Yeah, you're not kidding. A lot of reflective time, that's for sure.
Yeah.
You know, there's always an opportunity in every adversity, and as crazy as it sounds, one of the biggest things about this current enormous global disruption on a scale that none of us have ever seen before. It really, like past disruptions, although not as big, it reminds us of what's important, what's not as important, and it really requires us to get still with ourselves and reflective with ourselves. So, so that's what, those are some of the positives, and of course. We are really quarantined and locked down with the people we love. So great opportunity there too.
Yeah, there's always silver linings, but there is certainly a lot of chaos. It's a huge adjustment from, I think, definitely on a personal standpoint. Where you and I are doing meetings in our cars in parking lots now, which is a little bit of a change of pace.
Yeah, and 6-7 feet apart too.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like a high school kid again.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wanted to kind of pick your brain for a little bit today on, these are, like you said, this is kind of chaos and turbulent times on a scale that we've really never have seen before. Having said that, you've been around for decades. I mean, you've been working with leaders for decades, and you've seen and observed and helped them get through that times that were at very turbulent global crises. It was 9/11, it was the financial crisis, some things down in, some oil spills down in the Gulf. So what I wanted to talk about and kind of just pick your brain on is there's been people through all times like that and times where it's been very turbulent and there's been crises like this. There's people that have kind of come out stronger. And there's people that have not only survived those times, but really thrived during those times. So I was kind of hoping you could just kind of talk about what do those people have in common? What are they doing differently during times like these?
Yeah, you're exactly right. These throughout history, the most disruptive and extreme circumstances have really been tremendous learning opportunities for all of us in leadership to really see what is the difference of pulling people together and helping to get the most out of them and to really help them to get the most out of themselves. It really gets exasperated or magnified in these periods of time. I've been given a lot of thought, to our conversation today, and obviously, as you so eloquently put, I have had decades of experience in leading 2 Logical and our clients through many difficult, turbulent times. From extreme market corrections that occurred during like the Great Recession to prior to that, the tremendous devastation of 9/11, where I actually lost friends of ours and we lost clients during that period of time. Tremendous disruption from, companies ending up in bad ways because of the shift in technology, where they were forced to make dramatic changes in everything that they did, from product to how they go to market to the target markets that they work with, or face the fact that they're going to go out of business, and failed mergers and acquisitions that we've been called in at the last minute to help make come together and work. So obviously seeing a lot of this kind of thing throughout the decades, and it's part of the field we play in. But as I said just a few moments ago, the Corona-19, the virus, is really on a scale that we've never ever seen before. And but like these other situations I've mentioned, and even today, each situation, each disruption of this magnitude presents its own set of daunting challenges, and they're usually exasperated by an increase in risk that these type of turbulent, disruptive times cause. But when I look back on it, Sean, what I really see over and over again is that there really is a couple of things that are in common of leaders that tend to not only survive and help their teams and their organizations survive, but in many cases, they come out the other side and they're thriving, even more successful than they were prior to going into the situation. And there tends to be some commonalities or common denominators, if you will. And as I reflected on it, I kind of thought about it, and really sitting still and thinking about it, that there's really 4 things that I've observed throughout the decades. I'm not saying that there's not more, and some of what I want to talk about today, there's tangents to it, and we could go on and on for hours. But I kind of like to keep it simple. And when I net it all out, there really were 4 key things. So
you're leaving us on the edge, man. What are they?
Yeah, well, I figured I'd pause and let you ask me.
Come on, give us the goods.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to watch. But the first one that I'm going to share with you, in really being directly involved in major turnarounds, directly involved in helping organizations through some of these devastations that I just mentioned, is that when you look at great leaders versus weaker leaders, great leaders are really always in an enormous mode of control. They're always in control of their emotions and their control of their mindset, their thinking. And when something of this magnitude, a disruption of this magnitude occurs, one of the things that they quickly recognize is that they're not in control. And so, it's kind of like I'm kind of like, saying something that's, juxtaposed, but it's really the case. So strong leaders are always in tremendous control, right? That's why they're able to handle emotionally charged situations. They're able to make, good decisions consistently, rapidly, because they have tremendous mind control and tremendous control of their behavior. But when this caliber of disruption happens, they recognize that they're not in control. And so what they do is they stop trying to control the situation, because up until, something of this magnitude happens, they're hard driving, helping people to do the right things, execute on the right strategies, stay focused on the goals. But when something of this magnitude happens, they recognize that they have to literally kind of go into a pause or a neutral mode. And the reason why I say that is because, and I've consistently been involved in helping leaders to do this, but I also learned this through decades of experience of being involved in some really extreme situations. And what I found was that rather than them keep pushing on what was yesterday's world, because when this caliber, like the virus, takes over, hits our world economy, they recognize that by trying to control it, trying to stay focused on the goals, on the activities, is actually not effective at all. Instead, what they recognize is they need to move to what I've always coined and help people to coin as, they need to move to a mindset of cycling. So in other words, rather than trying to control and drive and do the normal leadership and management things, they need to kind of go into a mental fib and slow down and slow their thinking and really truly reflect and try to study the situation, try to really analyze what's going on. And that, believe it or not, is actually quite different than what most leaders do in times of disruption or in times of turbulence. They tend to actually get more tunnel vision. They tend to get even more myopic and try to tighten the grips, where in reality, their best strategy and the ones that have been the most successful have actually learned and moved quickly to loosen the grip. Talk to me as I'm saying that. What are you thinking?
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense, because the initial reaction, I think, for most people is to, particularly if they had something that they were, a lot of times, especially gifted leaders during times like this, they had something they were working towards. They had a strategy or a goal that they really believed in. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of like the rug gets pulled out from under them, and what they were working on isn't relevant anymore. But I think the initial instinct is to kind of grasp and hold on to trying to just impose your will on on the world in a way where they're focusing on things that are out of their control. I think that makes a ton of sense to kind of get back to basics of like, okay, what am I really in control of here?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. So what I have observed throughout the decades and help leaders to also do is they don't eject. There's a difference. They're not ejecting, but what they do is they slow down mentally, and they just simply, they're present, but rather than gripping and trying to control or being reactionary, they actually slow down to a point where it almost looks like they're not making any move at all. But what they're really doing is they're assessing, they're observing. Because a lot of times in really difficult times, and again, especially extreme disruptive times, people think that leaders need to immediately move. And yet most of the time when leaders do that, weaker leaders, they actually move the wrong way, because they themselves have to get still enough and get in control again of their own emotions, because we're all human. So no matter what the devastation is, whether it be the devastation of what we all in leadership, dealt with back with 9/11. I mean, you talk about massive emotions, and the same thing today in terms of dealing with the virus. There's so many emotions. So strong leaders, they actually slow down, they stop, and they get still. And it's quite different than what most people by nature would do. And so that's the first thing. And I kind of also liken it like this. if you've ever tried to carry a cup of coffee, you fill a cup of coffee. I know you're a big coffee drinker. Many of our listeners are big coffee drinkers. Try to carry a cup of coffee across the room after you just filled it up, and you filled it up a little too much. We've all done this, right? Or even a glass of water. And when we really are in our mind, it's like, whatever I want to do, I don't want to spill this. So what we do is we start to stare at the cup as we're walking. And the minute you stare at the cup, what happens?
Yeah, it starts to spill.
It starts spilling all over the place. It just spills all over the place. And yet, have you ever watched a waitress or a waiter in a restaurant? They put all those cups of like 10 glasses filled with liquids, and they just walk right over to the table, and nothing spills. You ever notice that?
Smooth as silk. Yeah.
Right? It's pretty wild, right? But I use that simple analogy, especially back when I would run training day to day or coaching an executive leader, to understand what I mean about being present but letting go. And that's a very visual way to help people to see that. So because by letting go, by not trying to stop what's going on and instead just being in it and with it, we actually gain the control that we need. And we gain the control because we gain the perspective that's necessary. In order for us to begin, when we do start to engage, to make better decisions, the right decisions, we have to be able to let go enough in order to gain the proper clarity, or at least the best clarity and insight that we can only gain by temporarily letting go, letting go of the goals and the plans and the strategies, and moving more to simply assessing the situation and the old goals and strategies. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, my mind goes to a place, you talk about cause and effect all the time. And I think that's a huge piece of, starting to get still in a period of time like this. People have to realize that the game changed. What worked, even a month ago, before all of this started, is not going to work anymore. The world has fundamentally changed. There's things that are more top of mind for people. There's things that people can't do, places people can't go, money people can't spend, all those kinds of things in a time like this. So I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of getting still and really assessing the situation. Is you're really getting a feel for like what is the playing field at this point? What is what's the cause and effect of what's really going on? How do we play this game? Because it's a different game than we were playing a month or two ago.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You see, when a leader quickly moves to what I call cycling mode, a mental cycling mode, they're able to be present, but rather than trying to feel the need to control it, which means it necessitates them to react and to act, they actually refrain themselves from reacting and acting and instead simply observe, because it's in the observation of the situation that they're able to now really look at, do the goals that myself and our team are working on, do they need to be adjusted? Do they need to be refined? Do they need to be changed? And in many cases, especially in extreme disruption like what we're dealing right now, it necessitates that. But it doesn't just necessitate the adjustment of goals, but it also extremely necessitates a change in potentially a change in the plans and the strategies. They need to be adjusted. But if we're trying to stare at that cup of coffee and not let it spill, which is the goal is not to let it spill, rather than just let go of the goal and just simply be present, we end up moving and making a lot better decisions. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and it's so juxtaposed to what most people do in crisis and most people do in this kind of a extreme situation. Nowhere near to the same extreme of what we're dealing with today with the coronavirus. But I remember, it's probably 10 years ago, one of our major clients in the oil industry was directly involved in the major oil spill that was taking place, the deep water oil well that started leaking onto the ocean. And, what happened there back at that time is that the leadership team of, actually the client is Baker Hughes, but the leadership team had, they'd been thoroughly trained in terms of staying and really understanding some of the principles that, obviously Two Logical teaches about leadership, and especially crisis leadership or leading in turbulent times. And they recognized that what they saw most of their competition doing was reacting. And what they did is they started moving their equipment out of the marketplace. And yet they made a totally different decision. Their decision was to stay calm, wait out the storm. And then when time came, when the government reopened up the marketplace for drilling to reconvene, all of their competition had moved their equipment out of the area. And as a result of that, they were able to capture literally north of 100 and maybe I think it was like 130 million plus in new deals and new revenue that would have never been captured had they not made better decisions based upon getting still for a little bit rather than just making quick decisions.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And it is certainly the kind of instinct that people have, or the knee-jerk reaction is to immediately react to whatever's going on. And it has to be a much more evolved leader to kind of take a breath and take in what's going on, as opposed to, just reacting out of, usually I think the reaction is out of something that's not going to ultimately serve them. It's out of fear or of the unknown or what's going on. And ultimately they're not going to come out the other side stronger than that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, and people that are in leadership roles, overwhelming amount of our listeners, we are so used to being in charge and having to make decisions, tough decisions, many times quick decisions. But in times of crisis, in times of extreme disruption, it is actually so much better to slow down and not make any decisions for a short period of time. You see what I'm getting at? And that's why, just stepping back and watching what I've watched our clients do that have been very, very successful is when they've moved that way. They slowed down and they really assessed before making any type of, big decisions. I'm not saying that there aren't other decisions that have to be made very quickly. Obviously, if a company's in severe danger of physical harm, obviously that's a whole different thing. If a company is running tighter in their financials and they have to immediately start, dropping expenses, those are all part of crisis management, especially in extreme disruptive period of times. But a lot of decisions, the ones that get companies in trouble, they're better served by slowing down. The other point, or the second main point that I've observed in strong leaders that not only survive but thrive themselves and their teams versus those that struggle or don't, is that they recognize during extreme disruptive times that many times what looks like the right strategy or decision is actually the wrong strategy and decision. So like the Baker Hughes situation where the competition made the decision that on first blush would make sense. Well, the government's put a moratorium on, you can't do any drilling here. We got to move our equipment, which is very expensive, right? And we got to move it to markets where we can get return on it. But, on first blush, it makes logical sense. But in a little bit slower and a little bit different perspective, begin to realize that there's enormous risk that would take place by making that decision too quickly. But it happens in a lot of things. I remember, back when the Great Recession happened, I remember one of our clients, a gentleman that runs a very successful financial advising planning business. He asked me, he called me up and he said, would you talk to, one of my lead advisors? And I said, why? And he said, well, he's just completely destroyed. I mean, his clients' portfolios have been, beaten down, they've blown up. And he's like frozen. And so, I didn't live that far away from this particular client. So I said, well, look, I'm going to be in the area. I'll stop by. So I stopped by over the next few days and I sat down with this broker. And when I was sitting there just small talking with him, I said to him, this is really tough and really difficult times. I said, yeah. And I said, you're afraid? He said, yeah. And I said, your clients are really afraid too. And he said, yeah. And I said, so, what are you doing? And he goes, well, nothing, I'm afraid to even call them. And I said, but, they're not paying for you to be afraid. They're paying you to help lead them in this period of time. And I said, so the most important thing to do is just what you're seeing me do, call and have empathy, call and have discussions with them. And I said, and find out what they're feeling, find out what they're thinking about. And I said, and also begin to recognize for yourself and for your clients the unbelievable opportunity that exists today. This was the Great Recession. So, for example, GE was all of a sudden, trading for a fraction of what it was trading at just days before, down at $4. I was like, when was the last time you were able to buy GE at $4? In other words, the market was so oversold, but he was so caught up in the emotion and so caught up in what most people were doing, which was doing nothing, that he joined the club. He joined the activity and the behavior of what most people who were really not being effective during that period of time in that industry, which was to not communicate, not to engage, and most importantly, not to continue to make strong, good, sound recommendations.
Yeah, so I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, no, I think again, that's the it's really easy to kind of go along with the herd of what everybody else is doing, and on a surface level, it could make a lot of sense. But I think, like you said, in circumstances like this, there's always opportunity, and the reality is the way that a lot of people move in times like these is kind of that knee-jerk reaction and they go with the consensus of what everybody else is doing. But I think even a helpful just thought experiment is looking at what everybody else is doing and think of like, well, what if I did the opposite of that? And a lot of times there might be opportunity in that, not all the time, but like those two examples that you gave with Baker looking at all the competition was taking their equipment out. What if we did the opposite? What if we left it? Or, a financial advisor of everybody's doing nothing. Well, what if we started investing?
Right. What if
and thinking of it that way?
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Prudently
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Prudently and in control, and in the right correlation to the client's risk, risk tolerance. But during that period of time, you're exactly right. What often looks like the right decision is the wrong decision. And people who are tremendous leaders of others, they recognize that. So they slow down, and because they've slowed down, they're able to make the proper assessments and the proper decisions. It's pretty amazing, really, when you step back and think about it. I could give you a million examples of it, but for the sake of overkill, I'll leave it at that. But there's a third thing too that I also want to share, and that is that strong leaders, they recognize the need during really disruptive times to many times revise goals and plans. And again, many times that's required. But what they also recognize and consistently do that's different than what most other leaders that fail refrain from doing or don't realize they need to do is that they actually help those they lead to create a new routine. So it's not enough to just recalibrate the goals and the strategies. It's important to help the individuals that we lead and work with to help find the new routine, because all people that are great at leadership are students of human nature. And when you study human nature, we know that we're all creatures of what?
Creature of habit.
We're all creatures of habit. No matter what, we're all creatures of habit. And so the folks that we lead every single day, they are habitually operating all the way up to an extreme disruption a certain way. So to just adjust the goals and even talk about some different strategies and plans is not actually enough. What's every bit as important is to take the time to talk about what is the new ideal day for you and I to perform at the highest level based upon the recalibrated goals or adjusted goals and based upon the recalibrated strategies and plans that are going to be so necessary for us to be effective and productive during these really turbulent, difficult times.
I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and one of the most powerful. Yeah, particularly now, one of the most powerful weapons that our development team has when working within an organization is helping people to realize that results are not random. They're a function of cause and effect. In other words, if our people do the right things, they bring in the right results. If our people do the wrong things, they bring in the wrong results. If they do a mishmash, sometimes right, sometimes wrong, the sum product is mediocre results. Once we develop that platform or common language in an organization, we also help them to realize that people are creatures of habit. So we have to help them to lead and manage their people by creating what we call the ideal day. And the ideal day is doing what we also call high payoff activities, right? And so in other words, what's the most important things that we need to do today? Because in any role, there might be 60 or 70 different things we have to do. But in every key role in any organization, there's always 4 or 5 things or 6 things that if we consistently do every day and we learn to do them at the highest level, we will peak perform. And so, it's one of our, pull the curtain back is one of our secret sauces, if you will, but it's very powerful. But during turbulent times, it's really important for our leaders to understand the need to actually help their people to talk through and think through what the new ideal day needs to look like. What's the new routine need to be? Because many of the folks listening are leading teams where their workforce has never had to work from home. They've worked in an office environment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, I think right now that's a huge adjustment and I think that's what is such a challenge for people is not only are the goals and the strategies and the plans changing and changing very suddenly, but the nature in which they work is changing too. And all of a sudden they're working from home when they've never worked from home before. And maybe the kids are home because they're home from school now. And, it's the house is chaotic and there's people all over the place or whatever it is. I think, establishing that routine is particularly important now, not only because the plans and strategies are changing, but just the nature of how people work is changing too.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. But there are some commonalities or common things that, we teach leadership and leadership teams and organizations when hoping to guide and coach their people to the ideal day. And that is by guiding their people to make the list based upon the goals. What's the high payoff activities that they need to do every day in order to move the needle forward, which again, in really disruptive times, it's different, but, or slightly different, or many times it's even dramatically different. But to also guide their people to make sure that they do the highest payoff activities, the things that will matter the most, first thing in the day, rather than midday or later in the day. So, again, not getting deep into, how to guide people to the ideal day. But I think for anybody listening, that just makes a lot of sense because even if, especially during really, really disruptive periods of time, if their day gets sideways, if they've already done the most important thing for themselves, for their role, and for the organization, and they get that done early, they stand a much better chance of being effective throughout the day. The other thing is during really turbulent, difficult times or disruptive times, as crazy as this sounds, people tend to be a little bit more centered early in the day than as their day goes on because they get calls from their friends and calls from their, other people and other conversations. And if those other people are not mentally strong yet, key words, they actually will distract them. And again, they don't execute on the stuff that's necessary.
Yeah, I think, even just having that one thing that in the beginning of the day, even if the rest of the day, they get distracted or anything else, if I got this one really important thing done, at least the ball got moved forward.
Yeah, that's right. And you brought up a great point a few moments ago, and I want to go back to it, and that is that, because this is definitely the case. There, obviously in today's world, a lot of people do work remotely. A lot of people do work home. We're seeing more and more of that. But there's still an overwhelming majority of the workforce that has and does still work in some type of an office environment. So people who are now working from home, and this might go on for a little while, they really have to find a safe place, a place that they can get quiet. And they might not be used to that. They might have to reorganize some of their home in order to get positioned right, in order to even be effective. You know what I mean? Like that workspace.
Yeah.
So there, there's because you got the dog barking, and you got the kids not used to mom being home during the day or dad being home during the day, and all of a sudden they want the attention, and of course so there's just There's a lot of dynamics there. So without you and I in a leadership role, giving people permission to actually slow down themselves to recreate the ideal day. What do we need to do based upon these times? What's the most important thing that we need to do that if everything else goes sideways for the day and we get these one or two things done, we've had a good day in this period of time. And then also little things like not only when to do certain things, but also where to do it. So there's a lot of pieces there. Again, we could go on, but I think that, at a 20,000 foot look, I think these are extremely valuable. I hope for our listeners to recognize that these are the four things that I've seen over and over again that great leaders do that leaders that tend more to struggle tend not to do. Which leads me to the fourth one, by the way. You curious?
Hit me, man.
The fourth thing that I see, and this is, again, it's so simple. It's the old, hiding in plain sight, but yet it's very important. I was on a call this morning with one of our leaders, one of our clients, and literally, during these extreme times, this is somebody that's been a client for a couple of decades. So, heavily executively coached, all of her team, her entire organization. It's a pretty sizable organization. Is thoroughly trained, in terms of mindset development, MQ. But she's literally just all over the map and kind of ranting a little bit about what's going on. And I just reminded that leader something that they know and something that I know that they will do and do well, but still to just slow down and remember that it's in these periods of time that it's important for us to not be less patient, but more patient. So leaders during these periods of time, they behave at even more extreme on key leadership virtues, if you will. So they're not less patient. They're actually more patient than they normally would be. They're not less tolerant. They're actually demonstrably more tolerant with giving people room to get something done, or giving people room to mentally even get adjusted and get okay. They're not less compassionate. They're more compassionate. They're not less attentive. They're more attentive. They're not less supportive. They're significantly more supportive. And the reason, Sean, is just simply this, and that is that, the people that we lead, they can and they'll often take for granted the kindness and the care that strong leaders provide when life is good. But what they'll never, ever, ever forget, and what they'll always remember, is how you and I move during times of extreme turbulence, challenge, and disruption.
Yeah,
I think that's
very true. No, I think that's very true, and those are the things that people remember. Is when things are good, it doesn't stick with people as much as how did this person, whether it's a leader or a friend or a family member, whoever it is, what they remember is when things got really tough, were they there for me? How did they behave when we were our back was against the wall and we were in the trenches together? And that's I think an opportunity certainly for leaders during this time. This is an opportunity to, one, I would think, take your leadership to the next level, but also really establish bonds with people, and being there and helping them through times like this is a really, really powerful way to do that. It'll stick with people for sure.
Yeah, it'll stick with people, and it'll stick with them for a lifetime if the relationship is handled properly. And it could be a relationship with amongst coworkers and amongst a leader with many people that they're leading and working and managing with. The bonds, much like soldiers in war during extreme disruptive periods of time, their bonds become lifelong bonds because of the way they moved and the way they behaved and the way they helped and protected each other during these really, really difficult periods of time. It's the same is true in business. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So those are the four is, take a deep breath, that principle of cycling, being really in control of your emotions and mindset. Number one. Number two, what looks like the right decision is often the wrong decision, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Three is creating
which we can
that
only
new
see.
routine.
We can only see by slowing down and gaining perspective and assessing rather than reacting early on. Is why number two so key. Go ahead. What was three?
Yep. Three is create that new routine and help people create that new routine, that new ideal day.
Yeah.
And four,
and again, because the common mistake that leaders make is even when they recognize the need to recalibrate goals and even recalibrate the plans and the strategies to execute to again begin to move forward towards new objectives, where they fall down is they fail to recognize, again, especially in extremely disruptive times, that's not going to be enough, that their folks are all creatures of habit. They are, you are, I am. And so we need to slow down and help them and give them permission. We actually don't have to do it for them. We just have to slow down and help give them permission to really, truly think through what is the new routines need to be in this period of time. And when a leader does that, they show a care and a second person sensitivity that leaves an indelible positive impression in the mind of those that they're leading and working with.
Yeah. No, and I think that parlays really well into four is being more patient, particularly now where not only is their goals and strategies and plans changing, but their whole life is changing. Their whole routine is changing, and that I think parlays really well into four of being more patient, not less patient, more tolerant, not less tolerant.
Yeah, I kind of categorize that as the common virtues that are witnessed in all great leaders, like patience, like compassion, like support, like being attentive, like caring. Those are the things that in times of really difficult periods of time, leaders can accidentally do less of, but yet the real key here is to do more of that and to consciously override our own emotions and our own reactions and do more of that. And a big part of that strategy is in terms of helping leaders to do that is the only way that people can really truly be patient is if they're patient with themselves first. The only way they can really be compassionate is if they're compassionate with themselves first. That's an old self-leadership component of the way that we train and develop companies. Only men and women that first learn to lead themselves will ever become truly effective and powerhouse leaders of others. And so in times of real disruption, it's really important for the leader to slow down and get more in touch with their own self first. And that kind of ties in when you said, how's it going, being remote and being, in isolation. I said, wow, the depth of me getting to know myself has really been intense. But, I kind of said it early, it almost sounded flippantly, but candidly, it's because of the way I was trained by my mentor. And that was during these periods of time to slow down and get more in touch with my own self first so that I can be more effective in helping and supporting those that are put their trust in you and me to lead them.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great way to wrap up. Thanks for taking the time, Joe. Any closing thoughts or anything to leave people with?
No, first I thank you for the thought and the idea of having us visit with our listeners and to share some of the experiences that we've had as a development team working in and out of the best companies throughout the world that have, fortunately and unfortunately, experienced a lots of trials and tribulations and challenges, but yet were victorious and came out and came through the other side. So that's the first thing. So I want to thank you. And then the second big thing that I do want to say is that, this too shall pass in that, right now it is extremely dark when we look to the future. But, just like the day, it's always darkest before the dawning of the new day. And I don't say that as a rah-rah thing. I say it because it's the truth. And, We are dealing with some really, really unprecedented, unique challenges, but this too will pass, and it will be through the handiwork of great leadership in all the realms of society that are ultimately going to enable us to all come out the other side, not only whole, but I believe in many, many, many counting and countless ways, stronger, better, and more effective as leaders in all of our respective roles, not only professionally, but as our leaders in the other roles that we have in life, as parents, as friends, as siblings, in any role you and I can think of. So thanks again, Sean.
Thanks, Joe.
The Motivational Intelligence Podcast is produced by the award-winning team at 2Logical, the world's leading expert in motivational intelligence and one of 2020's top 20 leadership training companies in the world, as recognized by training industry. As a result of the challenges popping up from COVID-19, 2Logical is doing something unique for a limited time. With podcasts more popular than ever and a suddenly remote workforce, having your own internal podcast might be one of the best things you can do for your people and your organization right now. We're offering to produce a free internal podcast for you, no strings attached. This will be a private podcast available exclusively to your employees, co-branded with your company, produced by our top trainers, and completely customized to your organization. We can only do this for 5 organizations, and once the slots are filled, they're filled. So if you're interested, get your name in early and fill out an application at 2logical.com.